Ms. Semel.
Well, I also am the same person that I was yesterday. I'm Gabrielle Semel, and the proposed rules state that the regional director should select an election date as soon as practicable, and I support that standard. Yesterday, I testified about 3 representation cases in Connecticut, Long Island, New York, and upstate New York involving T-Mobile USA, in which the representation process was dragged out unnecessarily, in my opinion, by the employer. And today, as I promised yesterday, I want to talk about what happened during that delay. While the parties and the employer and the employees awaited decisions in those cases and then waited for the actual election, all 3 petitions were supported. I should have said this earlier. All 3 petitions were supported by an overwhelming majority of the employees when the petitions were filed. In all 3 cases, while everyone was waiting for the results, the employees received regular communications from T-Mobile as to why the union was bad and not in their interest before the petitions were filed. So that was before the petitions were filed. Once the petitions were filed, and especially after the decision and direction of election, these messages increased, becoming a drumbeat that was somewhat overwhelming to many of the workers. In Albany, the drumbeat was sufficiently severe that CWATU ended up pulling the petition because we understood we had lost majority support. In Connecticut, where the process from petition to election was the quickest, the workers did elect unionization, but by 1 vote as opposed to an overwhelming majority. From the time of the decision until the vote, the workers were spoken to daily about the ills of unionization, either on conference calls, in one-on-one meetings, or in group meetings. According to one worker, and I quote, "Managers and supervisors make daily statements that we will be fired or lose some of our current job benefits if we choose union representation," close quote. On Long Island, support for the union was the strongest. However, that was also the place where the process took the longest. I think I testified yesterday it was close to 7 months. During that time, senior level managers were in the employer's facilities every day. That had not been the practice before the filing of the petitions. One high-level manager set up her office in the conference room and was a constant presence at the workplace. Employees were required to be on daily conference calls, some lasting as much as 2 hours, while they were told of the evils of unions. The situation on Long Island became so adversarial that a high-level manager told the employees on a conference call that a strong union supporter could not be trusted even to do his job. That resulted in quite a backlash from that personal attack, and the manager was forced or caused to apologize to that worker publicly. But the message had been sent: support the union openly, and you risk being personally attacked by management. The Act grants employers the right to campaign, and my testimony here does not seek to challenge that right. However, during the T-Mobile USA unionization campaigns, as with most other union campaigns I have been involved with, the employer's campaign against the union crosses the line from messaging to harassment. As stated by another of the T-Mobile workers, quote, "Many of us served in the U.S. military. One of my coworkers did 3 tours of duty in Iraq. We are not cowards and we don't scare easily. But the way the current election rules work has afforded T-Mobile USA too much time to delay, and they have used that delay time to terrify us about losing our jobs, our livelihood, and our dignity as workers, all because we wanted a fair chance to vote for the union. Elections should be scheduled as soon as practicable as the new rules propose, so that the employers don't cross the line and employees attempting to unionize do not end up feeling the way the T-Mobile workers felt. I know that employers argue that they need campaign time and that scheduling elections as practicable as possible would deprive them of the ability to do so. In my experience, that argument is false. Sadly, many employers incorporate their anti-union message in their basic employee orientation. The first day you're on the job is the first thing you learn. This is not a union company. We don't believe in unions. And that anti-union message is repeated, intensifying if there is even a whiff of union sympathy. This happens with large employers and it happens with small employers. Many unions, including CWA, campaign openly. The employer knows that there is a union campaign way before the petition is ever filed. At T-Mobile, CWA TU had been openly campaigning for several years, and T-Mobile was fully aware of CWA's efforts. CWA and Verdi leaders had even met with T-Mobile management at various times. T-Mobile did not need the extended delays allowed by current board procedures to make its position known to the employees. It wanted the delays to pound that message into the heads of the employees in order to convince them that unionization was simply not worth it. Representation elections should be scheduled as soon as practicable so that employees, who are really the most important entity in this process, can vote for a union or against it without harassment or intimidation. Thank you.
Ms. Semel, your comments to me are so helpful in one way, I mean more than one way, but one way in particular, because we're in a quandary because on the one hand you talked about employees during the campaign were spoken to daily. And we're thrust in a situation. I kind of view free speech rights. This is not meant to undermine, to speak against the interests of either employers or unions. In terms of speaking daily during a campaign, it strikes me that, among other things, that's an employee right. And it seems like we can't do very much. I mean, the Act, it contemplates speaking daily about union-related issues. But then you also made a comment that the employer made daily statements, employees would be fired or lose their job benefits if they chose the union. Now, the dissenting view with respect to the proposed rule advocates more vigorous enforcement against unlawful activities and more effective remedial measures. So one question I have is, do you oppose that aspect, which I think has probably support of all 5 board members? Do you support efforts to try to more effectively deal with unlawful conduct and to have more effective remedial measures during election campaigns? And if we accomplished that hypothetically, would you then agree that a reasonable time for people to speak daily about union-related issues is a reasonable outcome?
Well, of course I support increased efforts to deal with unlawful activity. There could be no doubt about that. But, when I was a board agent and I was madly in love with what I was doing, and I thought we can fight, we can protect workers, that was what I really believed in. But having done this for 30 years, the problem with remedial efforts during a campaign is that if a campaign is going on, filing a charge doesn't do you much good. It doesn't get resolved, first of all, in enough time. But also you have to file a request to proceed, or else you are participating in extending the election process, which is never what the union wants. So so that's not helpful. There's very little way that the union can get the agency to stop unlawful activity when it's happening.
But the premise of my question is we're in rulemaking.
Right.
Under existing law, the board, and I don't want people to get excited, but under existing law, the board... If
that could happen right now.
The board, in some cases, under existing law, responds to charges by having a bargaining order and dispensing with the election. So my question again is, if we devise effective remedies that are more effective and more effective ways to address the issue that we all agree is highly objectionable and inappropriate. If we do that, if we do that, would you agree that it makes sense to have a reasonable period for a campaign to take place?
No. And I don't, because I think a campaign has been taking place. In other words, the campaign starts as soon as the employer understands that organizing is taking place. And in CWA's case, I mean, I can't speak for the unions, but we do meet and we do talk amongst ourselves. And my understanding is that most unions do the same thing, which is the days of secret organizing are gone. I mean, unions organize in a public way. So the employer knows as soon as the campaign goes public, and that's usually way before the petition is filed. So the campaign is taking place. There is a campaign, and it's been taking place for a while. There's something else that I wanted to talk to, and I don't know if it directly addresses your question or part of the question, the first question, which is the employer has daily access to employees. The employer can talk to those employees as much as it can. The union cannot. The union doesn't have daily access. The union doesn't have access. I mean, if we're going to talk about, changing the world, we could talk about access to the unions, and let's have unions have as much access as employers. Unions don't have that access. So employers have it. They have it every day. They have it all the time. They have all sorts of ways of communicating with their employees. I don't believe an extended period of time is necessary for free speech rights. I think free speech rights exist before a petition is filed, and a shortened period between the time that the petition is filed and the time of the election will not in any way hamper free speech rights.
Ms. Semel, and in your experience, has technology impacted upon employers' free speech opportunities?
In order to answer the questionnaire that the AFL sent out to union side lawyers, I spoke with the CWA lead organizers. And I think our answer was that employers communicate with using emails at least 50% of the time, a little bit less for texts. But yes, the employers are using technology, and they're using it more and more.
Okay. And do you believe that in deciding what we want to do, we should take those kind of things into consideration?
Absolutely.
Really quickly. This has been very, very helpful. Want to get your views on two things. One, under the practicability standard or any standard that we might devise, should employer recidivist conduct in election situations be taken into account? By that I mean unfair labor practice findings, objections, for example, because it seems like one of your concerns is basically that, and I don't want to express a view here or there on this. I understand that from many of the labor commenters, there's a feeling that employers across the board simply engage in this conduct at the moment. Now, whether or not I agree with that, let's concede that there would be some employers who engage in objectionable conduct and unfair labor practices during an election environment. If there is a rerun election, for example, or if there is an election in some other nearby jurisdiction, which in same region, whatever, involving the same employer, in scheduling, in the practicability standard, should we address recidivism by that employer in other election situations?
I can't really comment on that without understanding what the proposal will be, but I cannot imagine I'm not creative enough or imaginative enough to figure out something that the board could do that would change the atmosphere once workers have been intimidated or given up. The statistics, although I haven't looked at them in a long time, for second elections is very bad. I mean, so that was another thing I used to think, well, if there's enough objectionable conduct, we'll just have another election. But you really lose much more because people are, they're demoralized by the process. It's not worth it. I think somebody talked about campaign fatigue. That's a real thing. I mean, people are energized, they want a union, and then it's just not worth it.
So your position is we should sort of compress the election time frame from the beginning?
Yes.
In order to
Yes.
on the supposition that objectionable conduct and unfair labor practices is just going to take place.
Yes.
Okay. And one other thing, because you mentioned that CWA's practice is typically to give de facto notice to employers, hey, we're organizing you. In order to deal with this free speech issue, should the board consider having all unions, since this is apparently the prevalent position that the employers supposedly know that organizing is taking place, to require unions some point in front of the petition if they want to have an accelerated election on the back end to inform the employer that it's being organized?
Somebody mentioned
Formally.
that on one of the earlier panels. I had never even thought about that idea, so I can't really speak to it because I'd have to really think about what it meant and what the ramifications are, and at what point. In other words, at the
Right,
point
that's-
that you 10 days before you file the petition, I would have to think about that.
We do that in terms of Section 8G, but I just wanted to see if you had any thoughts. Okay.
No, I don't.
Okay.